I'm Jon Lentz, City and State's Managing Editor, and this is Last Look. I'm joined today by Sigmund, the Executive Director of the Global Gateway Alliance. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, John.
So I wanted to ask you about a recent report you put out on the area's 3 major airports and the economic impact they have. Maybe you could summarize that briefly and tell us what its significance is?
Yeah, I mean, what we found working with the Partnership for New York City and using some of the data from the Port Authority was that there's a very significant economic impact to the tune of $63 billion for the area and almost 500,000 jobs. In the almost 10 years since the last time a report like this was done, those numbers have doubled. So, we and others, and passengers in particular, often focus on the downsides of airplane travel, the hassles and the difficulties of using the airports. But there are very significant upsides, particularly for the regional economy.
And let's break that down a little bit. I think you touch on tourism numbers, there's jobs for airport workers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I want to start with the jobs for airport workers because I think it's something that people don't think about a lot. I mean, the airports alone account for almost 500,000 jobs in this region. So that's both direct and indirect. On the airports themselves, about 200,000 people work, and then jobs like the parking lots around the airports, the vendors that service the food or service the machinery or the operations around the airports. There's another almost 300,000 jobs. So you're talking about something that, if it were lost to this region, would have a substantial impact on unemployment. I haven't seen statistics like this done for the region, but to the GDP, airports around the country account for somewhere between 4 and 5% of total GDP around the country.
Now, your organization has put a focus on some of the problems with these 3 major airports. I think they have some of the worst delays of anywhere in the country. Is it fair to say that if there were more investment, these numbers, economic development numbers, job numbers would be even higher?
I think that's right, and I think more importantly for our mission, unless we make the necessary investments, you won't see the kind of growth in those numbers that you would otherwise see, right? So tourism, which you mentioned, right now there's about 55 million people are coming to New York City, a substantial number through the airports. Because the airports have what are called slot rules, which means there's a maximum capacity per hour of the number of plane movements. That number, that tourism number, can't go up much higher, right? Because you just can't get more people in. Unless you expand capacity, which means more runways, and frankly around here, better air traffic technology, next gen, you're not going to increase the tourism numbers the way that you need to over these coming years to, 1, improve the economy, and 2, keep New York City the global capital of the world.
Now, there have been some improvements to terminals at some of the major 3 airports. Are those sort of more peripheral, marginal changes? Do they really make an impact? And beyond that, do you see any other real progress here?
Yeah, no, I think they make a significant impact. I mean, the 2 terminals in particular that you see at JFK most recently, Terminal 5, which is the JetBlue terminal, and Terminal 4, which is now primarily used by Delta, those are really transformative to the experience. They're also transformative to the number of plane movements you can move on and off the gates, as long as a number of other things happen. But as you suggest, I mean, all of these things have to happen in concert. You need to have terminal modernization for all the reasons that I just described. You need to have runway and capacity expansion because you can't get more planes in and out without having more room in the parking lot, essentially. And most importantly, you need to have a modernization of the air traffic technology. We're still using 1950s and 1960s radar technology. It was actually developed in World War II, and we're still using it here in 2013. There's nowhere else that we're still using the technology that was developed in World War II. I mean, imagine if those were the phones we were still using, right? We just simply have to be using GPS technology in the skies, or you can't get the kind of capacity improvements that you need to take full advantage of the billions in terminal modernization that are being spent.
And when do you think we might see some serious upgrades in adding to the runways? I know there have been some maps drawn out about reconfigurations and next gen again, this new technology, which I think is a federal issue.
It's federal. I mean, look, I think we need to start with next gen. You're starting to see some of the benefits now, right? There's something called the tennis climb, for example, which has allowed LaGuardia to take off in a different way so that JFK, which shares the same airspace, can use all of its runways, which it hasn't been able to do for decades. There's some community issues involved in that, so you get some NIMBYism and some pushback whenever you try to do these kind of improvements, and that would certainly happen with runways. But I think, look, I think overall, the reason that an organization like GGA exists is because overall there is a recognition at the government level and at the business level that you have to make these kind of improvements in our airports, or you can't do the kind of economic growth and tourism growth that we started this conversation with.
And I'm also curious about maybe smaller scale changes to improve the experience of passengers, maybe putting Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi in the airports. I know a couple of your board members put out an op-ed recently, and that looked at customs delays. So you can take 2 hours to get through customs coming through JFK. Yeah. Are there more small scale things like that that are on the horizon?
Yeah, I think so, and we certainly hope so, because all the things that we've just been discussing are 5 and 10 and 15 year and multi-billion-dollar processes. There are lower hanging fruit that can improve the customer experience that will just give people a different sense about our airports, a different sense of them as sort of caring about the customer experience, and two that you mentioned are important. One is free Wi-Fi. You walk outside to any of the major parks, coffee shops, et cetera, and there's free Wi-Fi. Our airports don't have it because they're suffering under a contract that the contractor Boingo did with the Port Authority in 1999, right? In a very different era again. And we really want Boingo to renegotiate that contract and provide free Wi-Fi. Customs, JFK is the biggest international arrivals airport in the country, and it has suffered from multiple hour customs delays. So imagine what that means is that you come off an 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 hour international flight, and you're facing sometimes 2 and 3 and 4 hour waits just to get through customs, just to get in your cab or your car or your train and go home, right? And that's unacceptable in this kind of global economy. And in fact, there are studies that show that upwards of almost 50% of international travelers plan to go back and tell their friends not to come to New York because of the customs experience. So the airlines, customs to some degree, but the airlines, the port, and us, we've really focused on this issue. And there are simple fixes. For example, there are what are called automated kiosks, right, and where you swipe your passport as you get in the line, and so when you get to the front of the manned booth, they're essentially just checking that you are who you swiped you are, right? And it moves things much more quickly. Delta had to step up to the plate and fund 40 automated kiosks at Terminal 4, which is its terminal and the largest international arrivals terminal in JFK. And already in October, we found that those helped cut wait times in half between October 2012 and October 2013. So those are the kinds of things that need to come to all of the airports, but there is a significant federal investment that needs to be part of that. And the federal government, frankly, has shortchanged New York's airports for decades. They shortchanged New York in general, given the taxes we give out and what we bring back, but they do it to the airports specifically.
Stephen Sigmund, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
And that's it for Last Look. To check out other Last Look videos, go to our website, cityandstateny.com.